Hello, this is Harbor and Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. So, social media, email, and Substack will be provided for you. Ratings are greatly important. So let me list some of the audio platforms that I'm on, and it'll be really appreciated to give feedback on those platforms to know what you think, how you feel. And along with that, questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email me. So, I'm on Audible, Amazon Music, Spotify for podcasters, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, and those just to name a few. And I'm expanding to, in the near future, I'm on all of the podcast platforms. So this episode is all about the scientific perspective about urban legends. Here we go. Let's dive in. So as I mentioned before, on Monday's podcast about the aspects of urban legends and pop culture, here's a little more insight on that to expand. Urban legends are an important part of popular culture, experts say, often insight into our fears and state of society. They're also good fun. Life is much more interesting with monsters in it, according to Michael J. Coven, a folklorist at the University of Wales. As he states, it's the same with these legends. They are just good stories. The variations in stories themselves, folklorists, all have their own definitions of what makes an urban legend. Academics have always disagreed on whether urban legends are by definition too fantastic to be true, or at least partly based on facts, said Coven, who tends to believe the latter. Discovering the truth behind urban legends, however, it is as important as the lessons they impart, experts say. Urban legends aren't easily verifiable by nature, usually passed on by word of mouth, or more commonly today in email form and through social media. To add on to this, they often invoke the famous "it happened to a friend of a friend," or the clause as it makes it FOMO, fear of missing. Well, not FOMO, it's FOAF. Clause that makes finding the original source of the story virtually impossible. The lack of the variation in no way diminishes the appeal that urban legends have for us, writes Jan Hartle Bruvan, as I mentioned in Monday's podcast, and The Vanishing Hitchhiker is stated with the start of all of this as far as urban legends, making it more mainstream, talking about urban legends, which was in 1981. A renowned folklorist, Brunovan is considered the preeminent scholar on urban legends in The Vanishing Hitchhiker. As a name for a classic legend was the subject's seminal work. The definition of an urban legend, he writes, is a strong, basic story appeal, a foundation in actual belief, and a meaningful message or moral. Most urban legends tend to offer a moral lesson, Coven agreed, that is always interpreted differently depending on the individual. The lessons don't necessarily have to be of the depth, meaning of life, and the variety, he said, as he says. Now, legends need to make cultural sense. Urban legends are also a good indicator of what is going on in current society, said Coven, who is part of the International Society of Contemporary Legend Research, or ISCLR, and is editor of the peer-reviewed journal Contemporary Legend. By looking at what implied in a story, we get an insight into the fears of a group in society. He told Life Science, according to the source Life Science that I'm reading from, and this will be provided for you on Substack. Urban legends need to make cultural sense, as he stated. Nothing that some stick around for decades while others fizzle out, depending on their relevance to the modern social order. It's lack of information coupled with these fears that tends to give rise to new legends, Coven said. When demand exceeds supplies, people will fill in the gaps with their own information. They'll just make it up. All right, so to add on to this, the abundance of conspiracy theories and the legends surrounding 9/11, the war in Iraq, and the Hurricane Katrina seems to point to distrust in the government among some groups, as he said. And, to add on to this with the conspiracies that, to update this, that is going on and today about the mistrust of science and the mistrust of everything else about. It would be very helpful to be straightforward in your impact and the information in which you're giving when scientists, particularly the problem that happened with COVID, being straightforward in what you're saying and how you implement something. And when it gets in the murky waters of particularly leading towards Fauci with the ideas of not having the good intentions for the public, it leads to people not trusting science, which they should, and getting into the conspiracy theories and pseudoscience and everything else. And it's good to delve in and think about the unknown and think about the what if and the possibilities. But it's unfortunate when tragic events or true events happen and it's out of corruption or greed or misinformation that leads to people to mistrust a very noble and a reliable source, which is science and all of these things. All right. But urban legends aren't all serious life lessons and conspiracy theories, experts say, with the scariest, most plausible ones often framed as funny stories. Those stories can spread like wildfire in today's internet world, but they have been part of human culture as long as there has been culture. And Bruno Van agrees that legends should be around as long as there are curiosity in life. It might seem unlikely that urban legends at that, will continue to be created in an age of widespread literacy, rapid mass communication, and restless travel. However, remains of the many weird, fascinating, but unverified rumors that often come to our ears is quite interesting, and the aspect in which I think it prevails of why urban legends persist and will still persist is about the whole lineage of the whole center around unexplained mysteries of daily life and the fascination behind that. Okay, to wrap up, and here's some more insight about urban legends, particularly from a scientific point of view and to about the perspective of how they see storytelling. As I said, a scientific point of view, if that wasn't clear of what I said. We're also drawn to, and this source will be provided for you on Substack. So this is from a BBC article. And I think it's also good to expand onto this from seeing things from an international point of view, as it ties to the lineage of folklore and tales of this nature, because of the origins of folklore and tales come from, quite understandably, from a global international point of view outside of the U.S. Okay, so we're also drawn to themes of survival, which is why many stories deal with life and death. That makes sense, given our evolution stories would have been an important way of transmitting valuable information that could save our skin or latter part. But the most memorable tales, according to Tarahan's recent lab experiments, involve some kind of social connection. We just can't forget a piece of lurid gossip. His participants were given a choice of tales and asked to choose one to read, remember, and pass on to another person. Each tale reflected the above bias in a different way, and it seemed to have a big effect on their popularity. One told the story of a woman who died after a poisonous spider made a nest in her unwashed beehive haircut. Dealing with the death, it was a classic survival tale, but although it piqued people's interest, it provided to be less easily remembered than some of the others. In contrast, a more memorable story concerned a woman who had cyber sex with an unknown man, only to find out much later that it was her father. It's hardly Jane Austen, but the story requires you to consider others, motives, and decisions, tapping into our social biases. So, as more stories are shared on the internet, our stories may lose some of their social nuisance and become even more ghoulish. It is certainly feasible that storytelling in the digital age may evolve in a very different way from the fairy tales of the past, which were shaped by the cognitive constraints of oral transmission, says Tarahan. These are just musings, of course. Tarahan has yet to study the appeal of Slender Man formally, though he plans to look into the stories on creepypasta.com, a website that allows users to share and contribute many of these modern urban myths. It is very much on, as he quotes, the to-do list for him to do. Storytelling is, after all, a craft like others, involving with tools and technology. Our entertainment has already seen monumental changes in literature and cinema, but perhaps those transformations are trickling down to the myths and legends we tell each other too. The humble stories that form a substantial, though neglected, contribution to our culture. It is an integral thought that the elements forged by storytellers from across the millennia are now being cast into a very different folktale, the beginning of a tradition that our descendants may be reading and sharing on their tablets in the centuries to come. Alright, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. And as I mentioned on Monday's episode, what do you all think about the impact and the aspects of urban legends? Like to hear from you. either email me, follow me on Substack, or make comments on Substack. It'd be greatly appreciated to hear the feedback, what you all think. And I think it's quite interesting of how these things just interwove itself into modern society. And I'd like to know what you all think. All right. Take care.